All right, buckle up for a deep dive that takes a bit of a detour this time. We're going to be looking at poetry slam advice, but the source material we've got is anything but your typical how-to.
Yeah, a little unconventional, you could say.
That's one way to put it. We're talking about an article, A Tractor Ride to Failure by Stephen Pinkwart. And let me tell you, this article, well, it starts off with a bang, or maybe more like a crash.
I'd say it's more of a slow, drunken roll into a well.
You're not wrong, not wrong at all. The author, he paints us this very vivid picture of a fire chief who, let's just say, maybe enjoyed a little too much liquid courage before, deciding to hop on a tractor. Doesn't end well.
No, shattering metal, sounds of, like, dreams drowning in well water. It's all there. Doesn't hold back on the details.
And the language, it's like he weaponized sarcasm, describing the fire chief as having more liquor in his veins than in his entire cowardly career.
Oof. Yeah, it's brutal, no doubt about that. But there's this dark humor to it, Makes you kind of keep reading. Like, where's he going with this? What's the point of dragging this poor fire chief through the mud?
Exactly. And then he hits you with this line, his blood alcohol level. That was his only achievement that night. Damn.
It's sharp, cutting, but also, you gotta admit, it makes you think. It's not just about making fun of this one guy's bad decisions. It feels like he's using this whole incident to say something bigger, about society.
Right. There's this part where he talks about how society thrives on these tiny deceptions. We talk about helping, but when it really matters, we look away. It's like he's pointing the finger at all of us, saying we're all part of this culture of just looking the other way.
And he ties it right back to the fire chief. The fire chief is just a mirror of a society that no longer wants to get its hands dirty. Everyone talks, but no one acts. It's a harsh statement, but is he right? Do we all shy away from responsibility when things get tough?
It's definitely making me think about my own actions, that's for sure. But here's where it gets really interesting. Out of nowhere, the article just takes this sharp turn into poetry slam advice. It's like, wait a minute, what does a drunken fire chief have to do with poetry?
Right, that's the beauty of this author's style. He grabs you with this shocking, almost absurd story, makes you confront some uncomfortable truths, and then, bam, he flips it, uses it as a way to teach you something totally unexpected.
So break it down for us, this shock and flip technique. He calls it using the black and white effect, right?
Exactly. The black and white effect, it's all about creating this stark contrast in your poem. Juxtaposing humor and seriousness, darkness and light. Like hitting the audience with a 1-2 punch keeps them on their toes.
And he gives some examples in the article, right? Like crashing into a tree and then joking about how the tree was the only one who understood him.
Yeah, that's one of them. Taking something potentially tragic or embarrassing and finding the funny side of it. But the humor's not just there for laughs, it's strategic.
So not just about being funny for the sake of it. There's a deeper strategy at play here.
Exactly. Think about it. That image of crashing into a tree, it's jarring. But then he flips it, makes a joke. You laugh, but it also makes you think. What does it mean to feel so alone that a tree seems like your only confidant? The humor, it adds this layer of complexity, makes the message stick.
That's really fascinating. And he's arguing this is key to captivating a poetry slam audience.
He is. And I think he's onto something. Poetry slam, it's all about connecting with the audience, making them feel something. And this technique, using humor to deliver that gut punch, it's a powerful way to do just that.
He even uses another example, a breakup leading to solo pasta dinners. Funny, but it taps into that feeling of heartbreak and loneliness we've all felt.
Right, it's relatable. We've all been there, drowning our sorrows in, comfort food. By using humor, he takes this potentially depressing situation and turns it into something the audience can connect with, even laugh at.
So is he saying the key to a great poetry slam is to basically make your audience laugh while simultaneously breaking their hearts?
You could say that, yeah. But it's more than that. It's about using those contrasting emotions to create a journey for the listener. You take them on a ride, make them think, make them feel, and leave them with something to chew on long after the poem's over.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all comes together. This fire chief, as much of a mess as he is, he's actually a perfect example of what not to do in a poetry slam. He runs away from the problem, avoids responsibility, and ultimately fails to connect with anyone.
That's a great point. The author's saying don't be like the fire chief. Embrace the mess, use it as fuel for your creativity, and find a way to turn it into something meaningful.
And the way to do that is through this shock and flip technique, using humor and honesty to create a powerful and engaging narrative.
Yeah.
Speaking of guidance, the author actually recommends a book to help readers master this whole approach, right?
He does. It's called Poetry Master. And he promises it's your ticket to driving your own tractor. But unlike the fire chief, you'll be the one in control.
I love that analogy. It's like he's saying you can have all the power and potential of that tractor, but you won't crash and burn. You'll be steering the audience exactly where you want them to go with your words.
Exactly. You'll be the puppet master, not the pawn. You'll be in command of your narrative, using your voice to create something truly impactful.
Sounds pretty empowering. But let's get specific. What exactly does this Poetry Master book promise to teach? What are the key techniques we can learn from it?
That's a great question, and I think it's time we dove into the heart of Poetry Master to uncover those secrets. But first, let's take a quick breather. We'll be right back with more insights from this wild ride of an article.
Okay, so we've established that this fire chief, maybe not winning any Employee of the Month awards anytime soon, but it sounds like Poetry Master might offer a path to redemption, at least when it comes to storytelling.
Yeah, for sure. Pinkwort's really pushing this book as like the ultimate guide to not just surviving, but thriving in the world of poetry slam. And this shock and flip technique, he keeps coming back to it.
And he seems to think anyone can do it, not just people who are like already super poetic.
Right. It's not about being Shakespeare. It's about learning the techniques, understanding how they work, and then just practicing.
So let's get down to it. What are some of the specific things this Poetry Master book actually teaches?
Well, he goes deep into this idea of building tension in your poem, which is crucial for that shock before you hit them with the flip. He talks about using really vivid imagery like, our fire chief heading for that well to really get that picture in the audience's minds.
So it's not just the words themselves, but like the way you deliver them, the pauses, the emphasis, all that.
Exactly. Pacing, rhythm, using your voice, even body language to really bring those words to life. It is kind of like acting, in a way.
This is reminding me of how he described the sound of the truck hitting the well, like the last piece of bread in a starving hand. Such a powerful image.
Right. It makes you feel it, not just understand it. And Poetry Master, it's packed with tips on how to achieve that kind of reaction from your audience.
But then after you create all that tension, you got to flip it. How does Poetry Master help you with that part?
He talks about a few different ways to approach it. One is humor, like he did with the fire chief. Take something dark and then find that unexpected funny side to it. He also talks about shifting perspective, looking at it from a different angle, maybe even finding a silver lining.
So instead of focusing on how reckless the fire chief was, maybe he could have talked about how peaceful and quiet the town was without his antics.
Exactly. It's all about that unexpected twist, that element of surprise that makes the audience rethink everything.
And this shock and flip, he thinks it goes beyond poetry slam, right? It's a storytelling technique you can use anywhere.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Think about, like, public speaking. If you want to grab the audience's attention, you got to give them something that shakes them up, something that makes them want to lean in and really listen.
So starting a presentation with a shocking statistic or a provocative question.
Exactly. It's all about the hook, that element of intrigue that pulls people in. And then once you have their attention, you can deliver your message in a way that they'll remember.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this could apply to so many different parts of life. But going back to the book, does Poetry Master actually give examples of how to structure a shock and flip poem?
He does. One example is about a breakup. Instead of being all sad and mopey, the poem starts with this funny description of all the pasta the person is eating now that they're single.
Oh, yeah. I remember that one. It's funny, but it also gets at that universal feeling. Heartbreak, comfort food.
Yeah.
It's relatable, even if you've never been through a breakup yourself.
Right. He uses humor to connect, to make people feel seen. But then it takes a deeper turn. It gets into the loneliness, the vulnerability of heartbreak, that feeling of being lost.
So it's not just about making people laugh. It's about using the humor to lead them to something more, something deeper.
Exactly. The humor is the hook, but the real message is in the flip, in that vulnerability underneath.
That's really clever. It's like sneaking in the emotional depth disguised as humor. Then, bam, hit you with all those feelings.
That's the power of it, right? You connect with people on a deeper level, bypass those defenses and make them feel something real.
I'm starting to think this book is more than just about poetry. It's like a guide to human emotion, how to communicate better on a deeper level.
I think you're right. It's about understanding what makes a story compelling, what makes people laugh, cry, think, and those are skills that matter everywhere, not just on a poetry slam stage.
Okay, I'm officially interested. Might have to check out this Poetry Master myself. But I'm curious, does Pinkwart ever talk about the downsides of the shock and flip? Like, could it come off as, manipulative or fake?
That's a great question. And it's something we should definitely talk about because it's a powerful technique, but you got to use it the right way. But before we jump into that, I want to go back to something else that really struck me about his writing. That line at the end of the article, "Be creative, Stephen."
Oh, yeah. That is interesting. It's almost like he's giving himself a pep talk, reminding himself to follow his own advice.
And it makes you wonder, is this shock and flip thing just a gimmick? Or does he actually believe in it? Does he use it in his own life? Maybe that's the real message here.
You're right. It's like he's saying, hey, we're all in this together. We all have stories, and we all need that little push to be creative and share them.
I love that. It makes it feel universal. It's not just poetry slam. It's about finding your own way to express yourself, even if it's messy or different.
So how do we apply this to our lives? How do we become more like Pinkwart, finding the poetry in the everyday chaos instead of, running away like our fire chief buddy?
That's the big question, isn't it? And it's something we need to unpack more. But first, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about the potential pitfalls of shock and flip, how to use it responsibly. We'll also look deeper into what Poetry Master has to offer off the stage and how it can help us all become better communicators and storytellers. Stay with us.
All right, so welcome back to the deep dive, where we're tackling this whole world of poetry slam and taking cues from a not-so-smooth fire chief and a book called Poetry Master. We've been talking about this shock and flip technique, but before we all go out and try to become poetry slam champions, I want to talk about, the potential downsides.
Yeah, it's a good point. Like any powerful tool, it can definitely be misused. I think the biggest risk is that it can come across as manipulative if it's not done well.
So, like using humor to kind of make light of something serious, or just shocking people just for the shock value.
Yeah, exactly. The shock needs to have a purpose. It should lead to a flip that actually adds something, depth and insight to the message. It's not about just being provocative for the sake of it.
And the flip itself has to be genuine, right? It can't feel forced, like you're just trying to make a point.
Absolutely. Authenticity is so important. The audience can tell if you're not being real. The humor needs to come from a place of understanding, and the flip should reveal a truth, not just a clever twist.
Pinkwart doesn't really talk about this in the article, does he? He seems so focused on how effective the technique is, but not so much the ethics of it all.
Yeah, that's true. But it's something we should definitely keep in mind. It's on us as communicators to use our tools responsibly.
So how do we make sure we're not crossing the line? How do we use shock and flip in a way that's both powerful and, responsible?
I think self-awareness is huge. We got to be honest with ourselves about our intentions. Are we using humor to avoid tough emotions? Are we shocking people just to get attention? Or are we really trying to connect with them, make them think and feel something real?
It's like that saying, with great power comes great responsibility. We have this powerful tool, but we got to use it carefully.
Exactly. And that's where Poetry Master can actually be really helpful. It's not just about the techniques, it's also about finding your voice and understanding the impact of your words.
So it's more than just learning the tricks. It's about becoming a more, empathetic and responsible storyteller.
Exactly. It's about understanding that language can shape how people see things, how they feel, and how we connect with each other.
Okay, I'm seeing how this goes way beyond writing poems or performing. It's about being better communicators in all parts of our lives.
I totally agree. Think about how often we misunderstand each other, how often our words don't land right or even hurt someone. Poetry Master, in its own way, is giving us a way to become more aware and effective with our words.
It's like that line from the article, society thrives on these tiny deceptions. We talk about helping, but when it really matters, we look away. Maybe learning to communicate more honestly is how we break free from that and start actually making a difference.
That's a really great point. And it brings us back to the fire chief, right? He represents that looking away, that avoiding responsibility. Maybe if he had learned to own his mistakes, find the humor in them, connect with people through being vulnerable, he could have turned his mess into something good.
Instead of crashing into a well, he could have crashed onto the poetry slam stage and just blown everyone away with his honesty and wit.
Right. What a story that would have been. Too bad he didn't have Poetry Master to guide him.
Well, lucky for us, we do.
Right.
And even if we never write a poem, what we've talked about today can help us, navigate the world with a little more humor, a little more honesty, and a lot more empathy.
Couldn't agree more. And who knows? Maybe we'll even help a few people avoid driving their tractors into wells along the way.
That would be a poetic ending, wouldn't it? So to all our listeners out there, we encourage you to embrace the unexpected, find the poetry in everyday life, and never underestimate the power of a good story. And if you're looking for a guide on that journey, we highly recommend checking out Poetry Master Posey Craft in Seven Be creative. Listener name.